401k advisors want to build a scalable practice, but aren't always sure what to do next. Welcome to Outcomes, the podcast designed to help advisors think, make decisions, and cast a vision to create a business for the future. Here's your host, Ross Marino, financial planner, author, speaker, and CEO of Advisor2X.
Welcome to Outcomes, the podcast. Today, we are joined by Kristen Schmidt from RIA Oasis. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I've been to your website. I've looked at some videos on your website. I've heard you speak before and read some blogs and things that you've written. And you mentioned something called bling disease. Now, I don't know what that is, but it certainly doesn't sound good. Related to advisors, can you explain what bling disease is?
Yeah, absolutely. The epitome of, I think what's happening in this industry, and it's happened for a while, this is kind of my way of calling it out and making it real for these advisors and financial planners these days. There's a lot of tech out there and it looks pretty. It looks flashy. It looks like it might save our world. And so instead of diving into the tech and identifying, one, how am I going to use this? Two, will my staff like this, and does this serve my firm the best? And three, where is this going to fit in my full tech stack? Will it integrate? Does it help us? Instead, the advisors look at things and say, oh, it's blingy. It integrates. The user interface, look at it. I can see it on my phone, and they buy. We just buy the bling. And so I can't tell you how many times with clients that I work with, they'll say, well, I bought this piece of tech. Notice they don't say I use it. So we all have a lot of junk drawers in our homes. And I think there's bling disease of a little bit of a junk drawer of tech these days, of what we have that's old or what we have that's new that we're not using. And it's time to do a little bit of winter cleaning before 2021 for sure.
It begs the question of, shouldn't the advisors know better? And I ask that because we all have bling disease at different times. I get that. But when we're running businesses, we're experienced, we're knowledgeable, we're somewhat objective after we've done this for a while, but yet we still fall into that trap with the bling disease. Why do you think we still fall for it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that happen, and I don't think it's falling for it as much as I think people are looking for quick solutions without taking the time to truly understand the impact or the need. So taking that a little bit farther, if advisors and planners took the time to identify what they needed out of a tool, let's use the CRM as example, okay? Most advisors and planners will immediately run to websites or demos. I'm going to look at Redtail, I'm going to look at Wealthbox, I'm going to look at Practify or Salesforce or Accelerate. I'm going to look at Salentica, and you look at the vendor, and you look at that vendor or that product to be the answer for what you need. And I challenge firms to flip that narrative. Do not put a vendor name on that CRM. Just call it a CRM. What do you need out of it? Be real with yourself about what you need versus what you want. Okay. I always tease and say, I want to live in Hawaii. I live in Wisconsin and it's 32 degrees today. Okay. So what do you want out of a CRM versus what do you need out of a CRM? And make that list. What drives you nuts? What do you love about some CRMs or some things you've heard about them? You take that list and then you go to the vendors and you say, show me these things. Explain to me these things. And so that helps you create a version of, I don't know what I don't know. My entire business is built on advisors saying to me, I don't know what I don't know. And by the time I don't have the time to know this. And by the time I look at everything, I feel like I have to go back and relook because things change, right? So I think it's filling the gap of I don't know what I don't know, but also being real with your business and saying, I need to identify the features, functions of this tech, not just look at it from the vendor's perspective. And I think that's a really big shift in saying bling versus needs, wants.
Here's my challenge. I hear you and I get that. I write down the needs today. And let's say I'm a typical advisor. I want to double my business in 3 to 5 years. Sure. Common goal out there. That's reasonable. I don't have to rework my entire business to double. So that's a reasonable goal. I may tell you that, but in the back of my mind, I may be thinking 5X or 10X.
Oh,
Right?
you're not me. You are.
Right, of course, we
Yeah,
all are. We just don't want to
course.
admit,
Yes.
we don't want to admit that we want to build an enterprise. Now I realize if I add a zero to the revenue of my office, my branch, my firm, it's a whole different world. It really is an enterprise, but I'm not going to let the facts get in the way. Let's just say I'm really thinking I do want a 10X, but I don't want to spend money today that may not be needed tomorrow. So what is the thought process between how much energy and time and money should I put in today to technology that allows me to grow, but doesn't cost me if I'm on the path to 5X or 10X?
Sure. I think it's a great question. It's a little bit of a loaded question because there's no right answer depending upon what you're doing with your business. I'll tell you some impactful pieces of where advisors believe that they might need the Maserati when today they feel like they really only need the Volvo. Okay. There's a couple pieces. Number one, I think the way that you're growing can determine the areas of tech that you might need to be more robust or more advanced. So let me give you an example. In a CRM, if you plan on growing your business by just acquiring advisors, those advisors are bringing in books of business. They will either have their own CRM, same one, but maybe connected to yours, or you're bringing in already acquired client information into your systems. Okay. So your system just needs a little bit more room, but it will fit into your home. If, on the other hand, your growth is going to be happening organically or through heavy marketing, you need a CRM that can handle pipeline management, a full prospecting process. You might need a lead generation tool in order to generate the growth at a higher level. You might need a new account onboarding tool or a robo tool, depending upon where these leads fit through that process. And so I think identifying where your growth is coming from and what comes from that growth, are these established clients, is this full prospecting in the CRM world? That's a big difference, right? Why do we need a sales force in our life is what I always get, right? You do get a lot of value out of a very robust and customized system like that. But in order to get what you want out of it, you need to spend hundreds of hours, hire consultants. And by the way, you have to have a blueprint of exactly what you want to build. They give you a plethora and they say the world is your oyster. Good luck with that. You need to build it. Every command, every automation, every function, every field you build. So if you have that manpower and if you have that blueprint, and you also have the need for prospecting and pipeline tracking and the dashboarding and the reporting, then there's areas to justify that Maserati while you're transitioning from that Volvo. If that's not the case, and maybe the area of focus or growth is within the investment management space, maybe you need something to help you in a TAMP capacity because of investments. Maybe you need something to help with your financial planning process, because as you bring all of these people on, how many plans can you do, right? And sometimes it's not tech, right? I talk tech all day long, 24/7, but let's be real. It might be the processes or outsourced services that you need, right? The only way you can grow is if you have repeatable processes. Maybe it's not the tech. Maybe it's building your process into the tech. So it's repeatable, it's automated, it's triggering, it's telling everybody what they need to do when they need to do it. Maybe that helps your growth. That changes where we live in tech. So a lot of moving pieces, but I think the idea is, where's your growth coming from? Where is that data living, right? We have that conversation all the time. Where does the data live versus where do you see it? And then also, what's the output you need from that, right? What's helping you to continue the growth? Because to your point, in our heads, we're thinking of that 10X, right? But is that 10X 2X, 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 or is that 8 and 2? You know, where is the tide coming from? And that helps people like me who are working in tech as a consultant to identify, you know, the movement of that tide and what tech can support you.
I think that's a great defining question, is where is your growth going to come from? Because I never separated it that way. I may have heard somebody said that. It didn't resonate before, but now it's clear as day, possibly because I'm at that place with my own practice. if you're acquiring practices and advisors, that's different than organic, which is going to be individual driven, client driven, automation, workflows, marketing. That's a much different world. And I can see how from a CRM standpoint, those are certainly two different worlds. And looking at a Salesforce, something more robust, where I was really trying to follow what you were saying, but when you said you have to build all of it, I kept drifting thinking, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to.
Right, exactly. And I have a lot of firms in the past, but a little bit more, it's starting to trend where firms are looking to be that umbrella for the smaller advisors or for advisors who are deciding, gosh, I just want to meet with clients. I don't want to run the business. I don't want to manage people. Kristen, everything you're saying to me, I want it to run like a well-oiled machine, but I don't want to be in the weeds on it every day. So we're seeing a lot more RIAs creating an M&A, approach where they can still be independent, right? Mr. Advisor can still be independent under this umbrella, but he gains all of the value of not having to run the business, right? When that happens, tech stack conversations are of utmost priority. When I talk to the firm who's acquiring these advisors, right, I have to have the conversation of, are you building a tech stack that everybody can tap into? Or are you allowing advisors to bring their own tech stack? And if so, my compliance hat goes on and says, how are you overseeing 5 different CRMs, 3 different portfolio management systems, and email on different platforms, right? And then the third option is, are you building a required set of tech stack pieces, right? And if so, what are they and how are you managing the best practices of those tech stack pieces? And so what really ends up happening with firms like that is the home office, if you will, has their one tech stack that might be a little bit different because of the volume they see. And then these individual RIA offices have their own tech stack. So throwing another wrench into it, a firm who has, let's say, 40 advisors underneath them, or even 10 different advisors, they might have a tech stack for the advisors, which is Redtail, Orion, Riskalyze, eMoney. Let's just throw them out there, right? And that's suitable for the advisor who has 110 million and is managing his clients. But the firm themselves has an AUM of 1.2 billion, is fully living in Salesforce, but also living in Orion and managing Riskalyze and utilizing eMoney. So there's some big pieces that might be different, and there's some big pieces that could be the same. But ultimately, we need to consider marrying them together and then also creating best practices around them if you're bringing more advisors into your practice.
Let's contrast the environment today where, as you said, technology is moving fast. We may have said that 5 years ago. I'm sure I said that 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't think it was moving as fast as it is today. So can you contrast the environment and then also go into your approach, if that's changed at all because of the speed of technological change?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I have 2 kids, and when I had my first one, I was like, oh God, it was so hard. And then I had my second kid and I was like, oh God, I don't know what I was thinking. That was easy as pie, right? So exactly the same. 5 years ago, it was very dramatic how much we thought tech was impacting, and everybody always felt like they were trying to catch up 5 years ago, right? I think there's also a lot of advisors who were excited to show their bling, right? We kind of, I always say, show our turkey feathers. I use this, I use that. And we were proud if we had gotten off of the server or done something in the cloud. And now, and let's call it out here. Now, which was January of 2020, is even so dramatically different than now of October of 2020, considering the pandemic and considering the immediate change for the value advisors drive to a client, right? So when we look at technology now, there's not only a necessity, but a requirement in order to continue the fostering of a relationship with a client, right? I always say, as a consultant, I can empathize with advisors and planners, because I have nothing tangible to sell either. It's my advice. It's my experience. It's my know-how of my learning. And that's exactly what advisors and planners have to do. We kick out a report, we kick out a plan, right? But at the end of the day, the value we were bringing was the relationship, showing up at the office, asking how their kids and their dog are, right? Going out to the community, seeing them in community settings, going on the golf course, having wine tastings with clients. It was the connection and the relationship, and all of that is gone. So the idea that technology is a little bit different now, I think fits in a couple of buckets. One is what I just mentioned. It's a necessity. Firms used to survive on paper and faxing and spreadsheets for CRM, and it was okay because the client still felt the love. Now we're seeing at a compliance level, it's required to be able to generate your information in a safe and cyber secure space. But secondly, we're seeing that it's a necessity because it's the only connection we have with the client, is offering them a client experience or sending them an email, showing them the love through technology is literally all we have. And so that changes the landscape. Secondarily, tech 5 years ago stayed in its lane. CRM was a CRM, portfolio management did reconciliation, financial planning wasn't even really a tech. It was, but it was a cherry on top. We all still created our own proprietary technology. That means you're using Excel, by the way, for anybody listening to the podcast. That's not special. That means you use Excel. And we get it. And we're going to smile with you and say, wow, you must have really built something cool. But it's Excel. So financial planning has fully taken on a wealth management approach, the scope of things. But right now, in today's technology, one piece of tech possibly fills 4 to 5 pieces of your tech stack. Okay? It does lots of things. That's a value. Wow, my portfolio management system can be my client portal, my trading and rebalancing tool. It can be my billing and reporting outlet. It can be my modeling functionality. But then that's also a consequence. Oh no, I have 3 pieces of tech and all of them want me using their portal. What am I going to do? Right? Or one has financial planning, one has light financial planning, one kind of calls it goals gathering. What do I do? Right? I have a risk tool, but then I have a financial planning tool that offers a 7-set questionnaire for my client. What do I do? So the tech is fantastic because it's offering us different tunnels. But when it comes to the decision in the firm, nobody's choosing what the tech is supposed to be used for. The last piece of that is that if you choose to only use a small piece of tech, I'm going to use 50% of it. You do have to suck up the fact that you're paying for something that you're not using. So when it does come to the investment that you mentioned before, we need to be honest with ourselves. Right? There's a tool out there, Asset Map, which people are probably pretty familiar with. And they've been a big advocate in the industry as well, and especially in COVID days of doing some pretty amazing educational webinars. And I've been an advocate of theirs for a while, but it's interesting. When I introduce their technology, I have to tell the advisors, this does not replace anything. It's another piece of tech. Right? Sometimes I do that when we talk about CRMs and integrations. The integration is great, but it doesn't replace you needing to go into your portfolio management system, right? So there's a lot of conversations to be had about it does more than one thing. On the surface, that sounds great, but it makes this landscape that much more confusing.
We're making some decisions right now, and within 60 days, we're kind of rebranding and launching and putting together a tech stack in our business. And I just had the conversation yesterday that if we just went back 12 months, there are multiple major decisions that we would have done differently because of how things progressed. And it wasn't just tech, but I would say that it's tech driven on what certain companies are able to do. So noticing that doing the transition now versus a year ago changed our end result. And I think that's some of the anxiety that we may have is I'm making decisions on what I know today. I recognize I don't know other things, but I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
I know you design workflows for clients. You ask a lot of questions around workflows. Help me walk through the thought process and maybe a consultative process of how do we determine what kind of workflows you need to improve, what do you add, what do you delete, and how that all integrates.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let's set the stage first of what a workflow is so that we're all talking about the same thing. In my world, when I build workflows, it is process. And when I say that, I always say the phrase repeatable process. So processes like new account onboarding, new client onboarding, move money, prospect to client, right? Lead to prospect, RMD. It is the common things that you do repeatedly, no matter who the client or prospect is. And that's what that repeatable process means. What I like to tell firms is the first step is to make a list of everything that you might do as a service for a client. Once you have that full list as a team, and by the way, what's really important is to bring in everyone who's active in that client service. It doesn't mean that the client service people are the only ones doing this, because the advisors have their own processes, client service people have their own processes, right? A trader might have their own processes. And so you need to get everybody's input. Oftentimes people in their own role, they don't know what everybody else does. We stay in our lane, right? And so it's not fair of us to write a move money workflow, not considering what a trader might do if you're not the trading person, right? So when you list everything that you do, then the biggest decision is it workflow worthy? That's the first step. Why would it be workflow worthy? One, if multiple people need to do things at different stages of that process, it's workflow worthy. We never want to take a task and play hot potato with it. It was for Sarah, and now I'm going to assign it to John, and John's going to bring it back to Sarah. No. If you ever feel the need to change the assignee on a task, it's workflow worthy. Okay. So that's number one. Then you can identify, you know what, this is actually worthy of maybe just a task template, right? It's just something we do really quick, but only one person does it and it's really minimal steps. So it's task worthy, workflow worthy. Multiple people are involved in the process, or we have decision tree moments. If then, right? Let's use move money as an example. If they don't have enough cash, we need to go sell something in the account. If they do have enough cash, go move the money at the custodian, right? Those are decision tree moments, often what's called outcomes. So if you have those in the process, that also deems it to be workflow worthy. Because otherwise, what are we doing? We're writing it inside a big description box saying, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. Nobody pays attention to that. We're too busy in our day. Right? So when we're writing workflows, I think it's important to identify if they're worthy. And then I think the next step is identifying, are you writing these workflows how you operate today? Or are you writing them on how you wish to be operating to be more efficient? And that's literally what stunts my clients' growth, is they don't want them written to how they operate today. Because they'll say, honestly to me, the way we're doing it today, I know isn't working. I know we could be doing so much better. Great. Let's write how you want to be operating. And where we halt, why people don't write so many workflows in their CRMs, is because that means we have to decide the best practice of how everybody should be doing it every single time. So when I'm working through it with clients and talking with them, the question is, all right, I just did it yesterday with a client. They were like, well, when a client calls, should we be triggering a workflow or creating just a task? And I said, what's your best practice? The firm decides, and then I'll help you build it. Right? And so that's the hardest part, is deciding what the best practice is and making sure that everybody in the firm is aware of that best practice. I think that's the biggest piece. And the last thing I'll say on workflow, and I'll be honest, this is the hardest to swallow. You're never going to be done with workflow, people. It's a thing. You know, the minute that we decide what our process is, something changes, right? COVID happens, the tech changes, the integration changes, something breaks. A client does not want to use DocuSign, but our entire process was built around DocuSign. Okay, we got to adjust, right? So workflows, the core of them are very helpful to write, but you will always be tweaking them and changing them as your business continues to change. Sorry to end on a negative note, though. That sounded awful. I think it's just the reality that sometimes we don't talk about.
Well, we need to know that. The reason I wanted to interview you and talk about this is you were a COO of an RIA firm. This is what you do. So I know you have knowledge, you have experience, and you have objectivity. And that's why someone hires an advisor, same reason they hire you, a consultant. So I wanted to go through that. What I kept hearing is the work is front end loaded. Because I know there's going to be a tendency to say, well, just give me your standard workflow for update meetings, Kristen, and we'll put it in there and maybe we can modify it down the road. And I'm pretty sure you would say, well, that's not how it works, right? Because we want the shortcut. So I know it's going to be upfront loaded, but you have to be realistic. So I wouldn't say that's a negative about changes coming. You have to be realistic. It's no different than anything else we're doing where we're planning for the future. We plan based on assumptions. Those assumptions may or may not happen, and life happens. Here we are. So just understanding that workflow management and modification is constant. It's not going to end, and that's what you have to do. Would you say that's the number one struggle with advisors who aren't sure what to do with technology versus the ones who get it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that workflow building drives firms. It requires them actually to decide how to run their business as a tight ship. And there's a lot of firms that have been extremely successful by not defining their best practices, and more power to them. But there is a level where you can't grow anymore without automation triggering and workflows and process that is not only written, but that the firm and the people, the staff, understand how your well-oiled machine is going to run. And I think that's the biggest piece. Also, so workflow does get a little bit painful, and I appreciate you saying that, because it means that we have to look under the hood of how you're truly operating or what might be missing, right? And so sometimes we'll write workflow and we have to stop and say, okay, we have a compliance issue here with how you're doing this. So I need compliance to talk to you, and then I can come back and you tell me how you want to operate. Right? Or until you get this tool, I can't help you have automation. So we either need to write the workflow with the manual process, or we have to stop, you implement this tool, you learn it, and then we can write the workflow, right? So there's oftentimes where workflow gets stunted because we've identified a very large hurdle in the process. So it's a little cathartic, but worth it if firms can stick through it, for sure.
I think it's an exciting time for firms and people who embrace the technology and realize that it's going to become even more important as time goes on. And I think there's going to be a separation of the really good practices, the elite practices who know how to integrate technology from the rest of the pack out there. And it may be pretty substantial over the next few years. So I think this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're very welcome.
I took a lot of notes. You shared some ideas, and you were real about it. And I appreciate that. So thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Outcomes. Subscribe now to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Advisor 2X. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.